Yo, it's your boy Nomad on how to properly land a Cinelifter or any coaxial multi-rotor where you don't necessarily have the luxury of disarming and just dropping down onto the bottom of the frame. In this clip, you can see how I land without disarming and then take off again with a fun little punch-out. This method can actually be accomplished with most quads if they're ironically heavy enough. Reason being is you need to have your idle thrust be as little as possible relative to the thrust needed to lift off, or you'll bounce a lot. Dynamic idle can help with this, but that's not for this video. Now, I know a bunch of you are headed to the comments with, "But what about air mode? What about that, Joe? Huh?" Well, calm your tits for a second and I'll tell you. In modern multi-rotors with beta flight, air mode is always engaged. In fact, it's set to permanently enabled by default nowadays. What even is an air mode, Joe? I hear you asking. Great question. Air mode allows the motors to rev higher than the current throttle position to maintain the current attitude. This is super important for zero throttle movements like dives or anything with significant hang time. Before air mode, if you went to zero throttle while in the air, you'd just end up wobbling around and wouldn't have attitude control over the quad until you gave it just a little bit of juice. Air mode solves this problem. The downside to air mode, and what many of you have probably experienced, is that the quad will violently bounce off of anything it touches or anything that threatens the I term in the PIDs. This includes the ground. If you try to land without disarming, you'll bounce all over the place. What I do is disable the permanently enabled air mode and simply put it on a switch. So when I come into land, I disable air mode since I'm not planning any other maneuvers other than hovering, and then I can safely ease my X8 down onto its adorable little landing legs without touching the bottom props against the ground. In addition, on that same switch, I make sure that the position that turns air mode on is also a pre-arm position for the pre-arm feature in beta flight. This makes it so I can't take off with air mode disabled and just end up eating shit the first time I try to do a delayed flip or roll. Another great example of this would be none other than Lumpy FPV. He disables air mode with the flip of a switch when he wants to be sure he's going to successfully skid underneath an obstacle. Now, in general, you want as little movement on the XY plane, left, right, forward, and backward, as possible before you lower down onto the ground. This is especially important for Cinelifters or any heavy quad with a payload that isn't centered. Most Cinelifters, save for a few, are very front-heavy, so you might even choose to drift backwards a little bit when you drop down so you don't flip forward onto the nose, smashing your cinema camera into the ground. Thank you for attending my TED Talk. Okay, bye!